Welcome to this series exploring innovation, progress and achievement using a technocentric paradigm by Ash Stuart.
You may want to also read Ash's original Substack article for the best experience, including footnotes and other details.
Episode 33C2, The Golden Crescendo, Reason's Reckoning with Reality, on the dichotomy between armchair deduction and real-world observation. In the previous episode, I provided an introduction to the fundamental questions of being, becoming, and knowing, and as explained by a preeminent thinker on the topic, and of course, using a certain train of logic and argument. You might say, well, okay, it may be logical, but surely someone else could come up with different logic. How I can really know? Or do we leave it to the so-called sages? Today we'll explore all this further. Flights of Fantasy. Last time, our guest was Ibn Sina, also known as Avicenna, a towering intellect who left his mark on Europe for centuries. Today, we'll look at another scholar from the same tradition, lived slightly after Ibn Sina, who offers a starkly different view instead. Ibn Sina is most famously remembered for his flying man thought experiment, which, if you remember, I only mentioned in passing with any detail only in a footnote. So what's going on there, eh? Well, that's a classical example. Let's dissect it a bit more now. In his thought experiment, Avicenna asked you to imagine a person floating in the air with absolutely no sensory input. No sight, touch, hearing, none of it. Then Ibn Sina asked the question, would such a person be aware of oneself? And provided a resounding yes as the answer. You now see my problem there. How the heck can I know the flying man was indeed aware of himself? How can I test it? How can I verify? How can I know for sure? In the field of the science of knowing, epistemology, this is one of the most fundamental tensions. War of words. Twisted words. But before I get into it further, let's head over to the Iberian Peninsula of the 1100s to meet our main character, the Andalusian Ibn Rushd, or in medieval Latin, Averroes. Just like our predecessor, proficient in several fields, including mathematics, physics, astronomy, theology, neurology, psychology, law, linguistics, and of course, philosophy. We got a glimpse in the previous episode that a major preoccupation of these scholars was reconciling philosophy and religion, reason and revelation. You will see the roots of this, as I've explained in the original article, episode 33, with the beginning of the wholesale translation of ancient Greek works into Arabic, marking the beginning of the Islamic Golden Age. This tension was heating up even as Ibn Rushd came to the fore with the hardline theologians, or as one might today want to say, fundamentalists. Gaining an upper hand. In this backdrop, what Ibn Rushd did was rather extraordinary. And, if you stick with me, I'll demonstrate how it matters to us later on. Another twist to the plot was, it was realized that the Aristotelian foundation on which Avicenna had founded the bulk of his work wasn't purely Aristotelian after all. On account of errors during the Greek to Arabic translations, works by so-called Neoplatonists writing in the 200s AD or later had been attributed to Aristotle himself. Seeing this as a corruption, Averroes took upon himself to cleanse philosophy by purging such distortion and comprehensively restoring an undiluted Aristotle once and for all. Uncommon sense. Going back to the question I raised in the flying man section above, let's add some color to the mentioned epistemological tension. All through the timeline of intellectual pursuit, there has been this dichotomy, that something can be explained using pure reason versus we require experience and experiment to arrive at knowledge. So on the one side, you have the rationalists who use instruments such as dialectic or deduction to pronounce the truths of things. I've deduced through pure logic that cats must have exactly 4 legs because symmetry is divine. On the other, you have the empiricists who insist on using our senses and observation to arrive at a true understanding of reality. Dude, just the other day I saw a 3-legged cat. Also, you need to get out more. And may I point out, this battle is raging to this very day, as you'll see from some of my referenced reading below. But between Plato and his successor Aristotle, there was sort of a similar divide. Plato used a more deductive approach, whereas Aristotle embodied the more empiricist one. So, the tragedy for Avicenna, at least in the eyes of Averroes, was that the former failed, because of the said translation attribution error, to apply true Aristotelian and thus empiricist principles in his work.
A more total Aristotle.
So yes, Ibn Rushd categorically rejected Ibn Sina's take on his flying man. He was not going to fly. Similarly, he objected to or dismantled other parts of Avicenna's work, including some of the other ones we discussed in the previous episode. Like, for example, in the essence versus existence point elaborated by Ibn Sina we touched upon last time, Ibn Rushd was in favor of the idea that unless you've actually seen a particular being, anything that has existence, how can you even formulate the essence of it? My own contribution would be how, as I explored in episode 38, people of the pre-Columbian Americas who lived in a continent that didn't have horses could have never arrived on the essence of a horse. Furthermore, as Ibn Rushd would go on to elaborate with his example of the dinosaur, well, okay, he didn't mention the dinosaur, of course he didn't, but QED? And as part of restoring Aristotle, Ibn Rushd commented on the entire corpus of Aristotle's work available to him. These commentaries are divided into 3 categories with varying degrees of complexity and detail. The first type, what's been called epitome, were the short commentaries, introductory summaries of Aristotelian doctrines, flexible interpretations for beginning students that distilled core teachings without detailed textual engagement. The middle commentaries offered intermediate analysis, paraphrasing and clarifying Aristotle's arguments while adding explanatory material. The great or long commentaries represented Ibn Rushd's mature scholarly method, comprehensive line-by-line analysis including the complete translated text with exhaustive philosophical examination of each passage. Think of these 3 as a tweet, a paper, and a dissertation. While this, in itself, is an extraordinary work of intellectual achievement whose influence spans centuries, as we'll see, this represents a key solution Averroes offered to the question I posed above. Ibn Rushd organized discourse into 3 levels based on Aristotle's logical categories: demonstrative, dialectical, and rhetorical. The first, the intellectually most rigorous, applying empiricist principles, is for the philosophers, the intellectual elite, not necessarily from an exclusionary intent, but because, pragmatically, they have at their disposal sufficient cognitive and other resources to tackle these matters comprehensively. The second is generally accepted premises, what's rather more suitable for the theologians, in modern parlance, say, politicians, demagogues. And the last set, persuasive and thus resorting to reason arguments, is for the masses, the common people. Again, think of these 3 as premium, standard, and basic plans.
Courses for horses.
Thus, Ibn Rushd, in one fell swoop, offered to resolve all the tensions of his day, that between religion and philosophy, between revelation and reason, and in doing so, making a case for the application of sound empiricist principles. He made the case for the importance of philosophy, of reason, logic, learning, while at the same time giving something to the hardline theologians. And he made the case again pragmatically for ordinary folk, those who cannot afford to extensive intellectual investment all this would require, to go about their lives with the guidance provided by allegorical, poetic, and persuasive means in Scripture. This was his pedagogical solution to the epistemological problem. Compare this with distinctions offered in the Bhagavad Gita of the Karma Yogan, Jnana Yogan, and Bhakti Yogan, which seek to reconcile the different tendencies different people have to their approach to life. The first type, the action-oriented, is urged to find fulfillment in work. The second, the knowledge-oriented, to find fulfillment in learning. And the third, somewhat similar to the masses or ordinary folk categorization of Ibn Rushd, the emotionally oriented, to focus on devotion. Just as Avicenna's Canon of Medicine was a key foundational text in Latin Europe for centuries, the commentaries of Averroes held the same position going into the 1600s. Indeed, for centuries after his time, Averroes was referred to in Europe simply as the commentator. But some of Ibn Rushd's more rigorous Aristotle-based approach proved too much for Christian Europe to take, leading to, in the late 1200s, official condemnations issued by European bishops. However, despite such Christian condemnations, the university system that developed in an otherwise faith-dominated medieval Europe, which I've discussed in episode 36, with its autonomy and approach to logical rigor, proved robust enough to withstand and bypass such, shall I say, in fairness, Christian fundamentalist objections. So yes, have we found a definitive answer to the question of how we know for sure? Tensions around such questions persist to this day, the tension between authority and self-verification. We only have to think about the recent pandemic. No doubt we've all come across explanations, justifications which made no sense to us, and likely, as in anything that gets politicized, the other side thought our opinions equally ridiculous. So, the problem remains. We cannot check everything, every single claim, explanation, theory, all ourselves. We cannot think through every philosophical debate that's been made, nor redo every lab experiment ourselves. So, how much can we trust someone else, the system we're stuck with, and of course, experts? I'm sorry, I'm not offering an answer. That would be too ironic, extremely hypocritical given the point of view I'm offering here. But in the next couple of episodes, I intend to present, as an advancement from what we've covered in these two and before, a few more tools, epistemological, intellectual, practical, common sense, that were developed to tackle these tough questions that I'd hope might be of some relevance in our own times.